I never imagined that the people who raised me would become strangers on the worst day of my life. My husband Ethan was only 34 when he passed away unexpectedly. One moment he was laughing with our daughter in the backyard. The next, he was gone. The days after his death felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I barely slept. I barely ate. Every room in our house reminded me of him. His coffee mug still sat on the kitchen counter. His jacket still hung near the front door. I couldn't bring myself to move any of it. While friends and neighbors surrounded me with support, there was one group of people I expected to lean on the most. My parents. Growing up, my mother always claimed family came first. My father loved giving speeches about loyalty. So when Ethan died, I believed they would be there for me. I was wrong. The first sign came during a phone call 3 days before the funeral. My mother sounded annoyed rather than concerned. "Do we really need to stay for the whole service?" she asked. I thought I had heard her wrong. "What? The funeral? It's several hours long." I sat in stunned silence. "My husband just died, Mom." "I know that," she replied. "But your father has golf plans." Golf plans. My husband was lying in a funeral home while my father was worried about golf. I convinced myself they were grieving in their own way. Maybe people handled loss differently. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But things got worse. The night before the funeral, my father called. "You know," he said casually, "people die every day." My stomach dropped. What is that supposed to mean? It means life goes on. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Life goes on. My daughter had just lost her father. I had just lost my best friend. And my father was treating it like a minor inconvenience. Still, I said nothing. I needed peace. I needed support. Most of all, I needed to get through the next day. I had no idea the funeral itself would become the moment that changed everything. And by the end of that day, I would never look at my parents the same way again. The morning of Ethan's funeral arrived with gray skies and steady rain. It felt as though the world itself was mourning him. I stood in front of the mirror wearing black, trying to gather enough strength to make it through the day. My daughter Lily sat quietly on the edge of her bed, clutching one of Ethan's old hoodies. She hadn't spoken much since his death. Every time I looked at her, my heart broke all over again. Friends began arriving at the funeral home before noon. Many had traveled hours just to pay their respects. They hugged me. They shared stories about Ethan. They cried with me. For a moment, their kindness made the unbearable feel slightly easier. Then my parents arrived. The moment I saw them, something felt wrong. My father looked irritated. My mother looked bored. Neither one hugged me. Neither one asked how Lily was doing. Instead, my father glanced at his watch. "How much longer before this starts?" he asked. I stared at him. People around us exchanged uncomfortable looks. "It starts in 10 minutes, I replied quietly. He sighed dramatically. "Good." I felt embarrassment burn across my face. But I pushed it aside. Today wasn't about him. It was about Ethan. The service began. One by one, people stood to speak. Ethan's coworkers shared stories about his generosity. His best friend described how Ethan had helped him through the darkest period of his life. Even the funeral director seemed emotional by the end. Then it was my turn. My hands trembled as I walked toward the podium. I looked out at the crowd. Dozens of faces stared back. Some were crying. Some were smiling through tears. I took a deep breath. And I began talking about the man I loved. I spoke about our first date. The way he proposed. The way he danced terribly in our kitchen just to make Lily laugh. The room was silent. Everyone listened. Everyone except my parents. Halfway through my speech, I heard whispering. At first I tried to ignore it. But the voices grew louder. I glanced toward the back row. My parents were talking to each other. Not quietly, not respectfully, actually talking while I was speaking about my dead husband. People around them were turning their heads in disbelief. Then my father laughed. During my husband's funeral. The sound cut through me like a knife. For a second I lost my place completely. Tears filled my eyes. The room became blurry. Several guests glared at my parents. One elderly woman even shook her head in disgust. But they didn't seem to care. When I finally finished speaking, the room erupted into gentle applause. Everyone stood. Everyone except my parents. They remained seated, expressionless, as if they couldn't wait for the day to end. I returned to my chair feeling completely numb. Yet the worst part was still coming. Because during the reception afterward, my mother was about to say something so cruel that it would destroy whatever relationship we had left. And once those words left her mouth, there would be no taking them back. After the funeral service, everyone gathered in the reception hall. The room was filled with soft conversations, coffee, and memories of Ethan. People approached me one after another. They shared stories I had never heard before. Stories about Ethan helping coworkers without expecting anything in return. Stories about him secretly paying for a struggling neighbor's groceries. Stories about the countless lives he had touched. Every story made me miss him even more. But it also reminded me how loved he was. For the first time all day, I felt a small sense of comfort. Then I noticed my parents sitting alone at a table near the back. Neither of them had spoken to Lily. Neither had offered a single kind word. Instead, they looked impatient. As though they were waiting for permission to leave. I decided to try one last time. Maybe they simply didn't know how to handle grief. Maybe I had judged them too harshly. I walked over and sat down. "Thank you for coming," I said quietly. My mother shrugged. "Well, we had to." Something about her tone made my stomach tighten. Before I could respond, she leaned forward. "You know, this whole thing seems a little excessive." For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood. "What?" She waved her hand around the room. "The flowers, the speeches, the gathering." I stared at her. "This is Ethan's funeral." "I know," she replied casually. "But honestly, people are acting like some celebrity died." My chest tightened. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My father nodded in agreement. "Your mother has a point." A point. My husband had just been buried. Friends and family were still crying. And my parents were criticizing the funeral. I felt anger rising inside me. The kind of anger that comes after days of pain and exhaustion. "Why would you say that?" I asked. My mother's expression remained cold. "Because someone needed to." I couldn't speak. Then she delivered the sentence that changed everything. "The burial was a trivial event, sweetheart. Life moves on." A trivial event. My husband's burial. The father of my child. The man who spent 14 years building a life with me. Reduced to a trivial event. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. The noise in the room seemed to disappear. I just stared at her. Waiting for her to realize how horrible those words were. Waiting for an apology. It never came. Instead, my father looked annoyed. "Don't make such a big deal out of it." That was it. The final crack. Something inside me broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just completely. I stood up slowly. My parents looked confused. "Where are you going?" my mother asked. I looked directly at both of them. For the first time in my life, I felt absolutely nothing. No guilt. No fear. No desire to please them. Only clarity. "You know what's truly trivial?" I said calmly. Their expressions changed immediately. "What?" my father snapped. "The relationship I have with both of you." The table fell silent. My mother blinked. My father frowned. And for the first time, they realized I wasn't joking. I wasn't arguing. I wasn't asking for understanding. I was done. What happened next would shock everyone in the room, and mark the beginning of a decision I should have made years ago. The moment those words left my mouth, my parents stared at me in disbelief. It was as if they couldn't imagine a world where I refused to tolerate their behavior. My father stood up so quickly his chair scraped loudly across the floor. "What did you just say?" he demanded. For years, that tone would have intimidated me. Not anymore. I looked him straight in the eye. "You heard me." My mother laughed nervously. "Oh, don't be ridiculous. You're emotional." There it was. The same excuse they had used my entire life. Whenever I was hurt, I was too emotional. Whenever I disagreed, I was overreacting. Whenever they crossed a line, somehow I was the problem. But this time, I wasn't backing down. "No," I said calmly. "I'm finally seeing things clearly." Several relatives nearby had stopped talking. They could sense something serious was happening. My father folded his arms. "You're embarrassing yourself." I almost laughed. Embarrassing myself? At my husband's funeral? After they had mocked the entire event? The irony was unbelievable. "You know what embarrasses me?" I replied. "The fact that I spent years making excuses for both of you." Their expressions hardened. I continued. "When Ethan was alive, he always told me I deserved better." My mother's face changed slightly. Because she knew it was true. Ethan had seen through them years ago. He was always respectful, always polite, but privately, he often asked why I allowed them to treat me so poorly. At the time, I defended them. I told him they meant well. I told him they loved me. Now I wasn't so sure. A painful memory surfaced. 5 years earlier, when Lily was hospitalized with pneumonia, my parents had canceled their visit because they didn't want to miss a vacation. 3 years earlier, they forgot Lily's birthday entirely. And when Ethan lost his job during a company downsizing, my father called him a failure before even knowing the circumstances. One memory after another came flooding back. Events I had ignored, excuses I had made, warnings I had dismissed. Suddenly, a terrible realization hit me. This wasn't new behavior. They hadn't become cruel. They had always been cruel. I had simply refused to see it. My mother interrupted my thoughts. "We've done everything for you." I shook my head. No, Ethan did everything for me. Silence. He supported me. He respected me. He loved Lily. He showed up when people needed him. Tears filled my eyes. And today, complete strangers honored him more than his own in-laws. Several guests nearby quietly nodded. My parents noticed. For the first time, they seemed uncomfortable. The room was no longer on their side. My father's face turned red. "You're choosing a dead man over your own parents." The cruelty of that statement stunned everyone who heard it. Even my aunt gasped. I looked at him for several long seconds. Then I answered softly, "No." I swallowed hard. "I'm choosing the people who actually know what love means." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother looked shocked. My father looked furious. But neither of them realized that the biggest surprise was still coming. Because later that evening, after everyone left, I would discover something Ethan had secretly prepared before his death. Something that would completely change my future. And expose the truth about my parents in a way none of us expected. By the time Lily and I returned home that evening, we were emotionally exhausted. The house felt emptier than ever. The silence was overwhelming. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. Lily went upstairs to her room while I sat alone in the living room. The same living room where Ethan used to stretch out on the couch and tease me about watching the same movies over and over again. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I could almost hear his laugh. Then reality came crashing back. He was gone, and no matter how badly I wanted it, he wasn't coming home. As I sat there, I noticed something unusual on Ethan's desk. A small wooden box. I had seen it before, but I had never opened it. Ethan kept important documents inside. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid. Inside were insurance papers, family photographs, and several sealed envelopes. One envelope immediately caught my attention. Written across the front were 4 simple words. "For my wife." My heart started racing. Slowly, I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. The moment I recognized Ethan's handwriting, tears filled my eyes. I began reading. "My love, if you're reading this, it means something happened to me before I had the chance to grow old with you. First, I need you to know something. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. And Lily was the greatest gift I could have ever received." I had to stop reading for a moment. My vision blurred through tears. After taking a deep breath, I continued. "There's something I've wanted to tell you for years. I know how much you've struggled with your relationship with your parents. I know you've spent your entire life trying to earn their approval. But sweetheart, you never needed it. You were already enough. You always were." The words hit me like a wave. Because deep down, Ethan understood something I had never admitted to myself. I had spent decades trying to win love that was never freely given. The letter continued. "One day, I hope you'll stop carrying the responsibility of fixing people who don't want to change. You deserve peace. You deserve kindness. And you deserve relationships that don't hurt." By now, I was crying openly. Then I reached the final page. And that's when I found something unexpected. Attached to the letter was another envelope. This one contained legal documents. I frowned. Why would Ethan include legal paperwork? As I looked closer, I realized these weren't ordinary documents. Months earlier, Ethan had updated his estate plan. Everything had been carefully organized. Savings accounts, investments, property documents, instructions for Lily's future. Every detail had been handled. But one note attached to the paperwork immediately caught my attention. It read, "Please make sure my in-laws receive nothing from my estate." This decision was intentional. I stared at the page. Shock washed over me. Ethan had never spoken about this. Not once. Yet somehow he had anticipated exactly what would happen. Then I noticed a final note written underneath. A note that made my stomach drop. "If they ever ask why, show them." The file marked, "Evidence." Evidence. My hands shook as I searched through the box. At the very bottom was a thick folder. And what I found inside would reveal a secret my parents had spent years hiding. A secret so shocking that it would destroy the image they had carefully built for decades. And once the truth came out, there would be no way back.